Good morning, Chris. This conversation that we're having today is a bridge between a very interesting conversation that you and I had a year ago. Hey, time flies.
Yeah.
And that was about the economic situation in South Africa, radical economic transformation, what the foundation of it is, and the real enemy. And I remember you said to me, the real enemy is white monopoly capitalism.
Yeah.
But I'm going to start with this hourglass.
Yeah.
Because I've been told by the producers we've got 1 hour.
Okay.
And the people from where I purchased this hourglass promised me that we will see that an hour is over when the last grain of sand falls through the hourglass.
Yeah.
So as the story goes, slowly our lives fall in little grains of sand, and today we will have a conversation.
Yeah.
And this conversation will be measured by these little grains of sand. Do you want to greet the listeners and perhaps just introduce yourself?
Yeah. Good morning to the viewers and the listeners, and good morning, Comrade Carl. And it's nice to be here again. It's an honor. The show is growing, which gives hope that a platform for alternative voices is alive and well. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thanks. And you don't introduce yourself properly, that you're Associate Professor of Economics at the University of the Witwatersrand.
Yeah.
I know most people know you, but at least for the few who tune in and want to know more about you, just tell us a bit about who you are.
Yes, I'm an Associate Professor of Economics at the University of Witwatersrand. So I'm an economist, and I've been active and participated in some of the most heated discussions in the movement broadly, the ANC, and in COSATU. So I've seen a lot in my little life that I've had. So yeah, I'm an economist by profession, but I'm a political activist as well. I'm intellectually engaged, socially conscious. Yeah.
So you're an organic economist.
Yeah.
You are involved in society. You're not some ivory tower academic who just sits there and comments down on us about inflation targeting and balancing of the economy. You know, the kind of economists that we see all the time on ENCA and Newsroom Africa and even SABC.
Yes.
But this show, we don't want those people. Because we know the nonsense that they talk.
Yeah.
But you phoned me, Chris, couple of days ago.
Yeah.
And we had a very interesting, very early morning conversation.
Yes.
Because you know that I'm an early bird.
Yes.
So it's no problem to phone me 5 o'clock in the morning. And you said, have you seen the letter that Mavuso Msimang sent in resigning from the ANC?
Yeah.
And your comment immediately was, this is a right-wing resignation.
Yes.
Comrade Carl, go and read your own letter of resignation, which you have written and submitted to the ANC a year ago. And strangely enough, it is exactly a year since I had written that letter. I remember I was in Cape Town and I was writing it. It was a painful exercise to write it, because to break up with an organization that you'd been a member of for 43 years
it's not easy.
Is no easy matter.
Yeah.
But I did go and I put the two letters, Mavuso's letter, mine next to each other, and I read them. And I said, yes, the professor is right.
Yeah.
What I say here, why I'm resigning, and what Mavuso Msimang is saying about why he's resigning, that's day and night.
Yeah.
Very different.
Yeah.
So I want you to talk to us about that, because, you know, interpretation about one's own writings is never a good thing. One can never interpret yourself properly.
Exactly.
You will always be too subjective. So that's why I brought you here to come and talk about the nature of Mavuso's resignation, my resignation, and what these resignations means for an organization such as the African National Congress?
Yeah. The starting point is to identify the main theme that triggered the resignations, both resignations. So the core thing that runs through Maviso Msimang's letter is corruption. Yeah. Says the ANC is so engulfed with corruption to such an extent that there is no political will or even capacity to deal with this wave of corruption that has engulfed the ANC. And you see this because corruption has led to the hampering of the delivery of basic services to the majority of the people. People are still living in shacks, education is falling apart, etc., etc., etc. And he attributes all of these largely to corruption. And then he also says he knows that the ANC did not invent corruption, but for a movement such as the ANC with that high moral ground to be engulfed in corruption is a disappointment. In fact, he says that the ANC has disappointed many people. It is a disappointment. That's what he says in the final paragraphs of his letter. So corruption is the core, it's the crux. So when you look at your letter says the ANC has abandoned its revolutionary politics, its national liberation revolutionary politics, its commitment to the liberation of African people, in particular, blacks in general, the return of the land, the redistribution or the return of the wealth to the ownership of the people as a whole. All those visions that the ANC had, that progressive vision, it has abandoned that. And you go into detail to say the modern version of that abandonment is neoliberalism.
Yeah.
The ANC went to CODESA, you say, and it negotiated, and finally, you use the word, it's like overwhelmingly or completely embraced neoliberalism.
Yes.
And for that, the ANC has been incapable of solving the national question that South Africa faces. So it's completely different. One says corruption, and the idea of corruption, you can find it in the DA. All the liberal commentators today, if they want to pinpoint what the problem with South Africa is today, they say it's corruption. They don't
Starts with those new liberals.
Yes.
It also goes back to Ramaphosa himself. Remember that letter that he wrote that he said the ANC stands in the dock
Yes.
of corruption.
Yeah, it's accused number
I do
one.
not, personally, I do not want to wave corruption out of the way, not taking it serious. Corruption is a problem.
Yeah.
But the problem with right-wingers are that they use this concept of corruption in a very particular way in order to try and sideline their enemies.
Yes.
And they formulate corruption as if it is something which happens only amongst the oppressed and the poor.
Yes.
They never visit it
Yes.
on those who are the corruptees,
Yeah.
the ones who corrupt
Yes.
and who are the core of this.
Yes.
And the interesting thing for me was now I hear there's a chance that Mavuso Msimang is going to join Roger Jardine's new party.
Yeah.
But I remember what happened in 2010 when there was the World Cup and the building of all these World Cup stadiums and the involvement in the construction mafia by Avenge. And do you remember who was then the CEO of Avenge?
Who was it?
Roger Jardine.
Okay.
So today, Roger Jardine stands on a stage waxing liberally about the problem of corruption. But I remember that Avenge bought itself off by paying a fine
to the
Competitions Commission.
Yes.
The same thing that happened with Standard Charter and all these institutions that have been manipulating the value of the rand.
Yeah.
But today, that same Mr. Jardine, who was so centrally involved
Yeah.
in that whole corruption around the construction mafia,
Yeah.
is telling us about corruption and that he's going to fight it. You see the conservative line that is being followed?
Yes.
And along the line, apparently, Mavuso Msimang is now falling in line together with Murphy Murobe, people from the Helen Suzman Foundation, all of them reactionary right-wingers.
Yeah, exactly. In the liberal camp or neoliberal camp. Although
Well, I think we must say clearly neoliberal, because I
Yeah.
wouldn't even describe those people as liberal.
Yes.
They are right-wingers.
Yeah, they are right-wingers, neoconservatives. So here's the thing about Mavuso's letter. It to me, it opened, when you pursue this corruption story, it opened a question. How was it possible for ANC leaders to be corrupted? Because the corruption starts at the top. Somewhere at the top, corruption started. In the previous conversation, we were talking about leaders who were making deals during negotiations,
Exactly.
right? But also, it reminded me of Chris Hanni's memorandum, where he clearly mentioned names of leaders that were doing things that were contrary to the morals and ethics and spirit of the ANC, right? Some top, some of the leaders, Mavuso Msimang himself mentioned as heroes, but Chris Hani mentions them in a bad light in that memorandum. And so corruption in the ANC has a long history. It did not start in 1994, but it goes back. It means that within the leadership, there has always been a seed that was ready and willing to be bought over, you see. So when that opportunity came, as Ronica Smith was telling us, in 1985-86, that seed was already there and ready to be bought. And we go to 1990, CODESA, the agenda is already laid out.
I think that seed of corruption that you referred to coincides with the elitist character that the ANC had almost right from its inception.
Yeah.
There was always a small elite that saw themselves as entitled to leadership.
Yeah.
And that elite, because they saw themselves elevated as entitled to leadership, also believed that they were entitled to a better life, to the luxuries of life. And that became especially pronounced during the period of exile, when the cadres who left the country, especially the young people who went into the camps in Angola, Uganda, some of the other African countries, were faced with very, very difficult conditions. And that's exactly what Comrade Chris refers to in the Hani Memorandum. And he compares that to the luxury in which the leadership lived and the manner in which they were being able to accumulate well for themselves, even in exile. Were able to make sure that their children and their families were well taken care of, even going to private schools, very, very nice universities like where Thabo Mbeki went. And one of those people who was part of that elite was Mavuso Msimang.
Exactly.
We all know that Mavuso mainly lived in suburbia in London. He hardly spent his time in Africa. But today he waxes liberally about the liberation struggle. It shows also in what the man did 2 years ago when he attacked the comrades of Umkhonto we Sizwe, who are still marching and who still have the sense of commitment and nostalgia to the struggle because they put on their MK camo uniforms. And at the graduation ceremony, he and President Thabo Mbeki, at one of the graduation ceremonies of UNISA, where he was giving an honorary doctorate, Mavuso, they were between themselves bantering and joking and denigrating these comrades. But you see, I'm telling this whole long story to agree with you on the roots, because those roots are exactly expressed in what Comrade Chris said in the Hani Memorandum.
Yeah.
Because the way they treated the NK cadres in the camps,
Is
where they were
exactly.
suffering, and looking down at them because they thought they were a higher class, they
Yeah.
were an elite, compared to the wealth and the luxury in which they lived in, is exactly the same thing
Yeah.
that they are doing today.
Yeah.
And if you don't manage the narrative around corruption, you actually let that narrative, if it's wrongly defined, buy into that whole understanding of life, that life philosophy.
Exactly. You know, the thing about neoliberalism, it became a very convenient way of legitimizing corruption.
Yes.
Because the leaders who were having ambitions of being capitalists, right, found the perfect framework. Because here is neoliberalism, which argues that the state must play a certain role in the economy, but in terms of ownership and control, the state must stay away. You see, but and what does that do? That opens the gateway for privatization.
Yeah.
And who stands ready to grab? Who stands ready to grab are the very same leaders who emerge as BEE. That is why.
But that's why BEE and this ANC elite overlapped very
Yes.
nice. They dovetailed.
And neoliberalism.
And they took care of themselves.
Yes.
Right from the beginning. Those who were the first benefactors of black economic empowerment was the elite within the African National Congress. And they never worked to expand that black economic empowerment to the broad masses of South African poor.
Exactly. And you know, the ANC in 1969 put this very clearly. It said that without the return of the basic wealth to the people as a whole, the socio-economic challenges facing the South African people will not be solved. Yeah. It put it like that. If there's no radical redistribution of wealth, not in a private manner, building a private capitalist class, but to the ownership of the people as a whole, that is nationalization, state ownership, by a democratic state.
That's the strategy and tactics document of 1969.
Exactly. Yeah. And then the Freedom Charter, to which many people or many ANC activists vow. It says that the mineral wealth beneath the soil, the wealth, and monopoly industries, right, must be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. Yeah. You see that thing? It does not say to a few. You know, it says as a whole. And to this day, this leadership, of which Mavuso has been part, has been refusing to acknowledge that that interpretation of the freedom, correct interpretation of the Freedom Charter is nationalization by a democratic state, you know. So what has happened? They took shares in companies such as Sasol, right? Monopoly industries in construction, cement, they are in banking, insurance companies, all those industries that the Freedom Charter said must be transferred to the ownership of the people as a whole. They are now in their own private ownership, or they are allowed to exist under white monopoly ownership. And then we expect, as Mavuso had expected, I don't know what happened, because somehow he expected that the sheikhs and the education system, the health system were going to improve with the wealth still concentrated under white monopoly ownership and a few blacks who have gotten shares in these white big companies, and under that system somehow sheikhs were going to be eliminated. I don't understand, because the core ANC politics are saying that's not going to happen. It was already said in 1969, and repeatedly scholars have kept on emphasizing it's not going to happen. You need a radical redistribution strategy. So
that 1969 strategy and tactics document played a central role in my decision to join the African National Congress 10 years later in 1979.
Yeah.
Because when I read it, I said, I can identify myself with this. It's
Yeah.
about the empowerment
Yes.
of the broad base of South Africans.
Yes.
And what happened was that empowerment was betrayed by these people. I
Yes.
see someone posted a few days ago, they said, well, Mavuso is talking about corruption, lack of delivery, but he's a multimillionaire.
Yes.
How did he reach that point? And how does he think that wealth of his relate to the fact of the lack of delivery? Exactly what you said.
Yes.
That they took away the empowerment tools that there were,
Yes.
and that was nationalization of the main sources of production, the forces of production.
Yeah.
And they pocketed them
Yes.
for themselves.
Yeah.
And then they turn around 30 years later, after they've been entirely complicit in this process.
Yes.
And then they say,
Yeah.
oh, but the ANC is such a disappointment.
Mm.
Now we must leave the ANC. But they were the core people that hollowed out this organization, created the rot,
Yes.
and removed the tools
Yes.
of the empowerment of the majority of people, the kind of things that Tito Mboweni did.
Yeah.
When he changed unilaterally the ANC's economic policy in 1991 at the World Economic Forum in Davos.
Yeah.
By just writing into Mandela's speech. You know, I'm always talking about that.
Yeah.
Writing into Mandela's speech that we are rejecting nationalization. No decision by the National Executive Committee of the ANC.
Yeah.
No democratic process. Just this man sitting in his hotel room, Mr. Mboweni,
Yeah.
rewriting the ANC's economic policy to suit the white monopoly capitalists and the imperialists. And of course, he had been very handsomely rewarded for those actions of his.
And you know what is interesting as well? There's a narrative that says the enemy of the ANC is within.
Yeah.
Right? And the people who are pushing that narrative are the very same people who are pushing white monopoly capitalist interests. You know, the enemies within. So when you articulate a program such as a radical economic transformation, it's easy to denigrate and reject. Then you say, okay, fine. You don't want radical economic transformation, at the core of which is a transfer of the country's wealth to the people as a whole. At the core of which is the Freedom Charter. At the core of which is the implementation of the vision of the strategy and tactics of 1969, right? Now you are the enemy within, right? You are associated with corruption, right? But if you accumulate wealth under the tutelage and the protection of white monopoly capital, that's not corruption, as you were correctly noting with Jardine, right? That's not corruption. Yet we know that if you dig deep down, the fundamental basis, the foundations of South African society are based on a historical injustice. They are built upon a crime against humanity, which has not been resolved, apartheid, because we still have apartheid in South Africa.
Absolutely.
It's just that we are voting every 5 years and people are not being, harassed, being shot willy-nilly. But taking away those eccentric brutalities of the system is there intact, but it's run mainly by an African group. You know, the government is deracialized, but the policies of the government is hardcore white monopoly capitalist interests. You know, you can't explain why a country such as South Africa would want with one mouth talk, we want to industrialize, but with another mouth, right, you allow your steel industry, your ISCO, to collapse, right? You allow your minerals to get out of the country without even imposing a requirement of some value addition before a mineral leaves. Let's add some value before, no, raw gets out, Yet, on the one side, you are saying there's high unemployment, lack of service delivery, and so forth and so forth. These are accumulation of a legacy of apartheid that the ANC has failed to deal with. The Perhaps what we also need to discuss is what has been achieved over the past 30 years.
Yeah.
By way of changing the power relations in South Africa, what has been achieved? There's not even a single product that is uniquely produced by an African industrialist. Even the idea of an African industrialist, is to me strange under these circumstances, or rare.
Well, in fact, the tragedy is that the largest industrial base that there was in the whole of Africa, Ekurhuleni,
exactly, yeah,
today has deteriorated to almost nothing.
Yeah.
You drive in the streets of those industrial parks and most of the factories are closed.
Yeah.
So we haven't moved forward.
Yes.
We've moved backwards.
Yeah.
And we don't see the empowerment of black industrialists.
Exactly. So the power relations in the South African system have not changed. And they were not, as long as the property relations, right, have not been changed but deepened and allowed white capital to run away by listing to London and all of that, right? You reinforce the inequalities. You increase foreign ownership. The little profits that are generated by the system are exported, are remitted through dividends or interest payments, or even allow government debt to be owned by foreign capital, which further limits your ability to maneuver by way of adopting developmental policies because now you're scared of international investors. But at the same time, you allow insurance companies to take workers' savings and invest them abroad and not in their communities. All these policies, when you look at the 1969 strategy and tactics and the Freedom Chart, and you look at these policies, you ask yourself, what ANC leadership is this? Where does it come from? Is it incompetence? I don't think so. But it's a deliberate ideological, informed by a deliberate ideological understanding of a certain interest that needs to be pursued, you see. But unfortunately, then the ANC loses credibility. Over 30 years, people cannot keep on saying, particularly the middle class.
But Joel Ntshitenzhe says,
Yeah.
He says the material conditions
Yeah.
have changed. Therefore, we cannot come and talk about the 1969 strategy and tactics and think it can be implemented in 2023. But my view is, I understand which material conditions have changed, and it's his.
Exactly. Yeah.
Because Karl Marx was quite right when he said the individual's conscience is determined by his or her material conditions. And I have watched Joel Ntshitenzhe, who was a strong proponent of the 1969 strategy and tactics, totally changing as he became more and more bought into this neoliberal empowerment project, where he became a member of the board of Nedbank, major shares in various companies, health companies, etc., etc.
Yeah.
And I said at one of the policy conferences of the ANC, when he was telling us there's no such thing as white monopoly capitalism, you remember it, 2017 at the policy conference at Nazareth.
Yes.
There's no such thing as white monopoly capitalism.
Yeah.
I stood up and I said, you know what? Joel Ntshitenzhe killed Peter Mayabuye.
Yeah.
Because Peter Mayabuye would never have said what Joel Ntshitenzhe is saying today. And that shows you the way in which this history is developed and how the consciousness of the ANC on a general ideological basis, but also in the individual expressions of that consciousness through people such as Joel Ntshitenzhe has deteriorated.
Yeah.
And this is what I want you to talk about, Chris. How do we deal with people who have sold out to the core that they have seemingly no further consciousness about what the African National Congress have stood for, and no consciousness about the need for empowerment of the majority of black poor South Africans?
There's only one way to deal with this, but is to raise a polemic.
Mhm.
A polemic against the existing conditions, and in the process expose the protagonists behind these conditions, because in South Africa there is a fear of directly engaging with the prevailing socioeconomic conditions, particularly if you tie them to the politics.
Yeah.
So it's nice, as an economist, for me to just talk about high levels of unemployment, inflation, slow growth, no investment.
That's the kind of economists I talked about that we see on ENCA all
Yes.
the time. When the minister delivers his budget speech,
Yeah,
the Dawie Roots,
Yeah.
they wheel them out to come and give us these technical discussions.
yes,
But that technical discussion never relates to the real life of the people in this country and
Yes.
the consequences of those announcements made by the minister, those neoliberal political and economic announcements.
exactly. As to what impact do they have on the lives of the people?
Exactly.
What impact do they have in changing the power relations? So the silence when it comes to that. Part of that is caused by the fact of that the way in which these economists are trained. They are trained so as to have a blind side to the social consequences of what they say. But some of them, like Daviro, they know what they are pursuing, because the technocratic approach to economic problems, right, is pursuing the interests.
But it seems the same disease has affected our governor of the Reserve Bank.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's trained in the same way. He's supposedly someone who comes out of the ANC.
Yeah.
But look at him.
But the governor
Talks their language.
Yeah, the Reserve Bank cannot deviate from the interest of its owners.
There you go.
Yeah. And it's at the heart. In any event, it is part of the instruments that manage the economy in the interests of white monopoly capital, like treasury, government and so forth. A department in government that deviates from the prescripts, the minister responsible will be corrupt, wearing a corrupt label all over. So you need to toe the line. That state is not I dare say, that state is not a democratic state as envisioned in the Freedom Charter. What we have in South Africa today.
Not a democracy.
It's not a democracy. Because remember, the Freedom Charter is a charter of our freedom. See, is what should obtain when we say that we are free. Yeah. It's just if South Africans want to know that they are free, they must go to the Freedom Charter and check: are we ticking the boxes? It's as simple as that, right?
But I remember you wrote an article where you did that ticking of the boxes.
Yeah.
And you pointed out that there's not a single one
Yeah.
of those 10 clauses in the Freedom Charter where you can tick the box that it has been achieved.
Yes.
Not one.
Not one. Not one. I challenge people to say, yeah, we've ticked this one. For example, the people shall govern, right? But which people are governing here? Because you see municipalities. Municipalities, not long ago, it was said that the large part of the corruption is in municipalities, right? But municipalities are closer to the people, are those arms of the state that are closer to the people. So if there's massive corruption in municipalities, then it means the people are not even governing in those institutions that are closer to them, state institutions that are closer to them. How are people governing in South Africa? By voting, or by being called into a hall to agree on an integrated development plan, IDPs or LEDs, as they put them in local government language.
See, that's when you outsource political consciousness to a mechanical process of voting.
Yeah.
And you treat voters simply as voting sheep.
Yes.
And that attitude is reflected also in what the ANC and some of the other political parties do. They go to the voter, they make a set of promises, which they know they're never going to implement. They've got absolutely no intention to implement those promises. But as long as they can get the cross on the ballot paper, for 5 years, the voter means nothing.
Yeah.
And there is no structures in society because we allowed our civil society organizations to collapse.
Yes.
We, in fact, outsourced the consciousness of civil society to the ANC. It was one of the biggest mistakes that we could ever have made.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the public, the general public of this country are not involved in the process of governance.
Yes.
And are unable to influence that process. They are simply used as voting sheep every 5 years to make a cross on a ballot paper.
Yeah, just to give you an example, this signing that South Africa has to move away from coal, right? That decision is a huge decision for the future of this country, right? It was not debated in Parliament.
Yeah.
It was not debated. Yet it's a huge decision that has to do with our natural resources, how we use them.
And remember how Ramaphosa rushed in to get that done.
Yeah.
It was within weeks after he became president of South Africa, that decision was taken, implemented, done by his brother-in-law, Radebe, who was involved in that process, and then moving to this whole idea of renewables and green energy that is unworkable.
It's unworkable.
All of this was done within 3 months after Cyril Ramaphosa became the president of South Africa.
Yeah. Another one is getting the IMF loans.
Yeah.
You see, huge decision. The RDP is clear that that is the last resort, right? But how do we go to the IMF and borrow from the IMF when our pension funds have got money invested outside? The RDP is clear. Borrowing from these international financial institutions is dangerous and it should be the last resort. Instead of tapping into our own savings, right? If we want to borrow from our own savings, instead of tapping from our own savings and investing in our own future, what is happening? We rather tie the country to international debt, to foreign debt. In whose interest is that? Again, it is to disempower the masses of South African people.
But it's a deliberate decision.
Yes, it's a deliberate decision.
Because there is a different option, as you said.
Yeah.
That other option is to tap into our pension funds and local savings.
Yeah.
But the Reserve Bank plays a central role in it.
Exactly. And Treasury.
Treasury. Of course.
Now, let us go back to Mavuso's thing. What is interesting as well, the neoliberals, right? They've got a way of couching their right-wing agenda in Marxist terms.
Perhaps it's because
like Joanne was saying.
like one part of their lives they learned some Marxism because they were in the ANC.
Yes.
And you know that these neoliberals are very capable of hollowing out a concept.
Yes.
And filling it in with something which the concept never meant.
Exactly.
So that's why you say they coach it in Marxist language.
Yeah.
Neoliberal approach.
Yeah. So let me be Joanne. You can't talk about the Freedom Charter now. You can't implement the Freedom Charter because material conditions have changed.
That's exactly what he said.
The concept of material conditions, it's Marxist. We need to analyze the balance of forces, and make decisions in such a way that we are not adventurist. So always...
You know what? When you speak like that, it's as if I'm sitting in one of the ANC National Conference discussion groups, missions on economics.
Yes.
The material conditions. We shouldn't be adventurous. We must understand the balance of forces, comrades. Therefore, we must make sure that we don't do the wrong thing. And then you end up right in the trap of neoliberalism.
Exactly. And then another concept is left. What does it mean to be left? I was taught.
Oh, yeah, you must bring in our friend Jeremy Kroon. Because remember, those of us who criticize their understanding of what it means left.
Yeah.
We are lumpen proletariat.
Yeah.
We are the
lumpens. Yeah,
We are the
lumpen. Or
lumpens.
Gupta rising.
Yeah.
I was accused of Gupta rising Marxism.
Why I'm referring to this issue of lumpen is because I was described in those terms by Jeremy.
Yeah.
That I'm a lumpen.
Yeah.
Because I criticize the way in which they interpret this concept of what is a sensible left policy.
Yes.
And what is that? I'm a lumpen adventurist.
Yes. Yeah.
I remember now exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So my understanding is that being left is always to side with the oppressed.
Exactly.
In any situation, you side with the oppressed, not with the oppressor, right? And specifically, in a class society like ours, you always side with the working class. You see, always side with the working class. Anything that hurts the working class, you fight, because you want to advance the interest of the working class. And that does not mean you are a socialist, by the way. It could be that you are a social democrat.
Exactly.
You see that thing? You don't have to be a communist, right, to advance the interest of the working class in a particular situation. We used to use the concept of being progressive. Being progressive, yes. So that is what it means to be to the left, to be on the side of the working class, to be on the side of the oppressed, on the side of the poor, on the side of those that are voiceless, voicing out, standing up for the voiceless. That is being left. And there are many people who are not communists or socialists or even Marxists who are left. You see, now.
But the problem with someone like Mavusu is he cannot even be described as left.
That's the thing.
But that comes back to, I want you to expand a little bit on this thing of the language that they use and how they interpret those concepts and subvert them.
Yeah. Another one that they take this, like you say, take a concept and then you hollow it out or create a new concept that looks like, So here's the logic. There's this thing called the National Democratic Society.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is that? So the logic was that, there is a socialist revolution which brings about socialism, a socialist society. Mm-hmm. And then mechanically, therefore, there is a national democratic revolution, right? It's that thing. Therefore, it must bring about a national democratic society. Mm-hmm. So, completely un-Marxist. You take these Marxist concepts and you bundle them and then you create some mechanical, logical thing, and then you end up with something that is nonsensical, really. Exactly. Right? A national democracy. What is the mode of production? In Marxism, we characterize societies with what you call the property relations or the relations of production, right? Capitalist society, the capitalists own the means of production, right? Then you've got the working class opposed to the capitalist class, right? Mm-hmm. You go to slave society, slave modes of production. And so that's how societies are characterized. This one, it's a unique society called the National Democratic Society. And it has never been in the language of the revolutionary ANC.
Not at all.
Yeah, because...
And it's totally divorced from an understanding of what are the balance of forces in the means of production.
Exactly. Totally. Is this a National Democratic Society socialist or capitalist? What is it, that this thing that you're building? But if you go to that document in the year that you joined the ANC, 1979, document, the Green Book. The Green Book says the National Democratic Revolution, right, must culminate into a transitional period towards socialism. It's a transitional period towards socialism. And
it talks about the various phases.
Yes.
You have to go through to get to that socialist revolution.
Exactly, socialist society. And then it says, remember Joe Slovo, no middle road. There's no halfway station.
Yeah.
It's a revolution in continuity. It continues. Yes, it can have setbacks, back and forth. But fact of the matter remains that strategically the thinking, right, was that this national democratic revolution led by the working class, which is in opposition to the white monopoly capitalist class.
And by the way,
see,
it must be led
yeah,
by the working class.
Yes.
Because this other society that they talk about is not led by the working class.
Exactly.
This national democratic society, the working class has got no leadership position there.
Yeah. It's a motive force.
Yeah.
It's a motive, it's
one of the multitude of
motive forces. It does not play, it doesn't
play the central
leadership role. Exactly.
Central leadership role.
That is where the whole thing then gets confused. Because we have this movement which is not led by any particular class. Right? When you say the working class needs to lead this movement, it's either you're ultra-left now.
Now, exactly, it's very interesting for me, this, because it comes back to this announcement that Jardine made of this party.
Yeah.
Because now, this group of elite who are not part of the working class, and who are not playing the central role, they are supposed now to save the country.
Yeah.
So now Mr. Jardine and Mavuso Mzimang and Murphy Murobe and people from the Helen Suzman Foundation are going to save South Africa.
Yeah.
How on God's earth is that possible? Because the perspective where they come from, the material conditions in their homes where they come from, will make sure that they will never empower the working class and the majority of black South Africans to gain control over the means of production in this country.
The history of their accumulation
tells you where they're going.
Where they're going.
And the objective today for them is to protect what they have accumulated, because they fear that the ineptitude and the maladministration of the Banana Republic under Cyril Ramaphosa is going to cost them what they have accumulated. This life that they hold on for so dearly.
Yeah, you see, I think what this is said because you take the ANC as a revolutionary movement, you infest it with termites.
Yeah.
You destroy it, you corrupt its ideological orientation, you create all this fancy footwork, inside there, create confusion. And then after that, now that this movement is facing serious crisis, right? Particularly urban working class, right? The working class is feeling that the ANC has really betrayed it. The middle class is feeling that the ANC has betrayed it. So the masses. So you even use this basic need, electricity, to even affect the rest of the strata that are supportive of the ANC, to say, look, whether you like it or not, whether you like the ANC or not, but come on, it's failing to provide you with water and electricity. So you even use those basic needs to take the ANC down. You see that thing? And then once you've done that, then you turn around. You see, you point a finger. You say this thing has failed. The ANC has failed.
Yeah.
You see that thing? But I hope the masses of the people are able to see that and say, no, but let's move beyond the forms, you see, of political organization or the forms of organization. Let's look at the actual class interests, that cut across party political lines. Like you were saying, Helen Suzman Foundation and the DA is one thing, but somehow they find commonality with a certain section of the thinking inside the ANC, the neoliberals. They are one. That is a cross-class, there's a cross-party class alliance.
But it's a class alliance.
It's a class alliance. Now, where is the working class leadership? Where is the left leadership across political parties to emerge, you see, to counter this? Already, I mean, there was this collection of parties that they call it a what charter. Right-wing parties met and came
Is
up.
that the same part of that thing, the Moonshot Pact?
Yes, yes. So
But they're already, busy fighting with each other in there. But along the lines, they're coming together on this class.
Exactly. So we need to see the same thing happening on the left. You see, on the left, we need to see that convergence to say these are the minimum issues that we are united around to basically wipe the political slate clean and have a left force, right? And
you need that force. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
You need that force to be united.
Yes.
Because the divisions within those sections of our politics is allowing this reactionary middle class and upper class that form their connection to continue to gain control. So you talk actually the language of my heart. Because for me, the essence of being a revolutionary today in South Africa is to forge unity amongst the progressive left. And at the center of that progressive left must be the leadership of the working class. So in 2 days' time, the party of which I'm the president, African Radical Economic Transformation Alliance, is going to make a major announcement about forging unity amongst the progressive left. Because I said from the moment that we started this organization, ARETA, I said from that moment, the single most important job that I have in the leadership of ARETA is to forge unity amongst the left and to put the working class at the front of that leadership. So anyhow, that announcement will come in 2 days. As we're talking now, I'm busy with the preparations for that. That essence of unity must never be for one moment disregarded.
Yes, it's huge because without that left working class leadership emerging, it will be very difficult. I mean, we've got lessons already. If you look at the Venezuela, right, the emergence of Chavez, right. If you look at the PSUV, it emerged out of a unity of the left forces. It was not there was a Communist Party in Venezuela, Communist Party of Venezuela. It was there, right?
But it was part of the unity of left forces.
That led to the formation of that alliance or that front. You see, that was led by Chavez. It's defending the revolution now, right? Without the mass support of the people of Venezuela, that party would have long been removed. See, that's the power of the broad unity of the left. That's the lesson. If we're talking about left politics in the 21st century, that's the form in which it is taking. You go to Bolivia, right? The same pattern emerges, right? The party that is leading Bolivia today, it is a party that is coming out of a unity of social formations, right? And then says, these are the minimum demands. And then out of this, we are saying we're forming a political instrument, right? Then it wins elections, supported by the masses of
One of the early examples of that was what happened in Chile with Salvador Allende. And then, of course, the Americans understood it, the USA. Kissinger, who was the other day, kicked the bucket, thank God. He saw the danger and he went and empowered Pinochet to take the necessary action to destroy that left alliance that Allende was leading. Now, what you're describing in Venezuela and in Bolivia is exactly that same process. And that is what we should do here in South Africa. But do you want to talk a little bit about what are the minimum program of action, the components of that program of action
Yeah.
that should be part of such a left alliance for it to be successful?
I think this left, for it to succeed, because it should not ignore the national question in South Africa. So we need to confront it as it is, right? Black people in South Africa, particularly the African people, the majority, right, are powerless.
Mm.
We need to come up with a strategy to empower, so that the power relations in society, and even the way South Africa looks, it must look demographically correct, in every way, in whatever institutions we establish, even in this left alliance. There needs to be that demographic mosaic.
The national question can never be ignored.
Can never be ignored. And what does it mean? It means that first and foremost, the land question. This dilly-dallying around the land question, this left unit must be clear. First thing. And when I talk about the land question, I also talk about the basic wealth, commanding heights of the economy, right? They must be nationalized. This left must be clear on that. The role of the financial system, banking, insurance, the Reserve Bank, must be clear. And then issues of education, right? We need a free, as the students already told us, free decolonized education system, right? We need that. We need healthcare. Those basic rights, basic necessities that people need to survive. Housing. Right? Because once we resolve the land question, or we deal with the land question, then ground is set for proper, decent housing to be provided to the people. Industrialization, when it comes to the economy, right? Industrialization. The minerals in this country, we need to beneficiation
of our base mineral.
It's a base infrastructure. The pillars, industrialization and infrastructure, and the delivery of basic services should be the basis, the basis upon which we create jobs.
Exactly.
Yeah. So all South Africans willing and able to work should be able to find work. If they can't find work, then the state must take responsibility for their upkeep.
Yeah.
And if the state cannot take responsibility for their upkeep, the state must give them work. It's like that. And then this left unity must also be clear about international relations. Because South Africa is found wanting when it comes to international relations. When it is clear, let's take the issue of Gaza.
Yeah.
Right? We need to be clear, right? The issue Ukraine, Russia. We need to be clear as South Africa. We should not be found dilly-dallying. South Africans, or the majority of this left, needs to be clear where it stands on matters of. We are anti-imperialist. If you take that stance to say, when it comes to international relations, we adopt an anti-imperialist stance. And this is what it means to be imperialist. This is what it means to be anti-imperial. Then it's clear. And then lastly, the way the state operates, right? Right of recall.
Yes. And accountability.
And
that right of recall mustn't depend just on a vote on a ballot paper 5 years.
Yeah.
It must be
continuous
through the process of the whole democratic institutions.
Exactly. There needs to be a radical restructuring of the politics of the state in South Africa. Yeah. So that, to me, those are some of the basic principles or basic demands that we can all, agree with.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah.
I'm going to bring you back again.
Yeah.
Because between me and you, there always has to be a long conversation.
Exactly.
But the hourglass is empty.
Yeah.
The hour is over.
Yeah.
But as I was sitting here listening to you, I thought I must talk about why I've brought this photo.
Yeah.
Photo of Comrade Walter Sisulu. And Comrade Walter has always personalized for me that ability to understand the need for the working class to lead and the empowerment of the people and humble leadership.
Yeah.
I was given a choice by the ANC leadership when I published my first book in 1993.
Yeah.
Who from the National Executive must come and launch your book? It was there at Hyde Park. And I said, Comrade Walter, because I could relate.
Mhm.
Now, sadly, he's gone. I've written another book. You and I spoke at the beginning of this discussion about that book. You asked me, when is it being published?
Yeah.
I'm having a few problems because one of our major leaders in this country doesn't like what I said about him.
Yeah.
Not going to identify his name, but he is generally known as number 2.
Okay. Yeah. No, I
So
think.
I'm busy revising some of the chapters to make sure that the book will not be taken off the shelves.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this man launched my first book. This man personifies humble leadership.
Mm. Mm.
And I hope that in the future, this left radical alliance that we're talking about, this unity
Yes.
that we want to create amongst the left,
Yeah.
can achieve this. And it comes back for me
Mm.
to what I wrote in my resignation letter.
Yeah.
A betrayal of the original ideals
Mm.
for full liberation in this country, which must include economic liberation.
Yes.
Can never just be so-called liberation from racism.
Yes.
So
yes.
thank you, Chris. Thanks for being a friend and a comrade and always being prepared to come and share in these conversations. This is the first one
Yeah.
of a series of In My Crosshairs conversations with Carl Niehaus. We're going to do it now on a regular basis, once a week.
Mm-hmm.
So every week I'll be interviewing someone to come and talk about critical issues
Yeah.
in our society.
Yes.
Because we want to reach out to a broad sector of the South African community.
Yes. Yes.
We want to have a conversation that doesn't happen on EMCA, Newsroom Africa, and the SABC, the main news networks, because they censor us, they silence us. And this conversation must be held on these platforms.
Yeah.
And I hope that in my crosshairs, in conversations with Carl Niehaus, will be able to make a contribution to that. Yeah. And this conversation with you, which is, as I've said at the beginning, is a continuation of an earlier conversation that we had about the economy, sets the tone for the conversations that we will have in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Comrade Carl.